Hello everyone and welcome to another member sponsor video being hosted by Mr. Logan Frank. Logan is on the fifth part of our little mini series covering how to create Pong with Python. So Logan, what you got lined up in this video? This is going to kind of wrap things up, isn't it?
This video is going to wrap up the Pong game, and the topic we're going to address here is drawing scores for both of the players. We're going to draw text to the screen, a simple number that represents each player's score.
Okay.
That score, of course, incrementing every time you get the ball past the other person's paddle.
Okay.
Now, in order to do this, we'll need to look at a font object within PyGame and also take a look at the considerations in rendering those fonts first to surfaces themselves, which surfaces that can later be blitted onto the screen.
Okay.
So, let's go ahead and kick this all off with the surfaces themselves. I'm going to scroll down within our game to the textures section, right below where we had made the ball texture and player texture, and I'm going to create the actual font object itself. This is going to be stored in a variable that I'm going to call HUD font, and HUD font is going to be a pygame.font, and we'll create a font. So font. And then to create a font, we need to give in some information. We need a font that is going to use to render the text, to draw the text, which can be a true type font file. In my case, though, I'm going to specify the value none. I'm going to allow PyGame to pick a default here. That simply freed me from having to find a font or load a system font or anything of that nature, since we're keeping this game relatively pretty simple.
Right.
Now, the next argument here is the size of the font, which I'm going to specify as a size of 32. You'll probably note that, at least on Windows, the size generally differs from what you would expect in a standard Windows application.
Okay.
It may be based simply on how the SDL TTF, or TrueType font system works. But again, this is in fact the value. Even though it doesn't correspond to Windows style values, you have larger numbers makes bigger font, smaller numbers make smaller font.
Right.
Now, the next thing I'm going to do is make two more surface variables. I'll make a player1 score. As a matter of fact, let me just jot this down. Player1 score. This is going to be an actual surface, a texture, just like ball texture and player texture. But it is going to hold the rendered result of some text as represented by the HUD font. And we're going to kick this off to begin with. We're going to render the value 0 to it directly. So at the beginning of the game, the text, the drawn rendered text, will represent what the score value starts out as, 0. So we'll say that the player1 score, the surface, is equal to HUD font dot render, and we're going to render the text as a number 0. We're going to specify this as anti-alias text to make it look nice. So specify 1 for anti-aliasing. And the color I'm going to use is color_green. Again, that setting we had defined at the top of the game. And that should take care of player1 score. I can duplicate this line now, and we'll use this same code to make the player2 score surface. Now, right off the bat, let me go ahead and get these player scores drawing to the screen. So I'll jump up here to the draw method, and right after we have blitted the player and ball textures, as a matter of fact, let me copy one of those lines. Actually, no, I take that back. I'm going to rewrite the new line because I'm going to handle positioning differently here. I'm going to look at screen and tell it to blit the surface player1 score, and I'm going to specify a position for that score. I'll specify that manually. Player1 score should be at the top left corner of the screen, since player1 is on the left. And we want this spaced off the edge of the screen a little bit, and that's why we had made the text padding setting variable. So what I'm going to do is, since text padding should be a value of, I believe, 25, it means we want to specify 25 in X, 25 in Y. So I'll create a set, I'll make some new parentheses, I'll say text padding by text padding for this sequence here. And then we'll finish off with the call to blit. Now I'll copy this line, but for player2 score, we have some more offsets to consider. For player2 score, player2 lives on the right-hand side of the screen, which means we need to go to the right, far right, screen width, and then come back some amount based on how wide the text padding is. We also need to take into consideration how wide the text surface itself is, because now the surface is still going to be based on the top left-hand corner. Just imagine the rendered thing is now a texture with a point at the top left. So we also need to take the text's own width into account. So we begin at the right edge of the screen, which is screen width. Then we need to offset back some based on how wide this this surface actually is. We can look at player to score, the surface that we rendered based on the text, and it is a surface like any other, which means we can run the get underscore width method, and we can subtract from that a final offset of text padding. And in doing so, that should drop us back on screen, so we should have the same visual offset on both sides of the screen. I'm going to...
are we missing text padding? Okay.
I think we're good. Either way, I'm going to run, which should run a syntax check, and then we'll run the game and see what happens. And we are missing the text on the right-hand side of the screen, so we are indeed missing something.
Yeah, it's...
we have text padding by screen width minus score.getWidth.
X. Look at your order. The very first one should be all of that, and then it should be comma text padding, because right now you're saying take Y and...
I see. So we have X text padding minus...
No. Actually, go ahead and keep backing up. Yep.
Oh, I see. Reverse these two.
Yep.
Well, I'd specified this in YX.
Exactly.
And what we're looking for here is X by Y.
Perfect.
So X and text padding.
There we go.
And that places the value properly on screen.
Right.
I'd gotten thrown off a little bit because I noticed something here. I'm looking at a surface, and I used the getWidth method here.
Mm-hmm.
I believe earlier in code I did things like surface.getRect.width.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that goes back to the fact that this is what I'm considering prototype code. So
right.
I'm sure there is that and many more things that you could go through and make more efficient.
And it's almost 6 a.m. in the morning.
So with that in mind, you may want to go and find any other relevant uses to reduce the amount of typed code in the program. But it works well here, and now we have both the text pieces aligned, which is very nice because if we get into the double digits, we should still be able to read that overall width of the resulting surface and still maintain our padding along all the sides.
Yep. All right, so now we need to hook up our scores.
Yeah, we need to, because we know that we set the score to 0 and we never did anything after it. If we scroll up to the player class, score is 0 and then nothing else happens. So the very first thing to do is make sure that score is accounted for every time the ball goes off screen. And that portion is detected back up here in ball. And so we have, if the right edge of the ball goes off the left of the screen, that's the point at which player 2 gets a point, because player 1 has now just missed the ball. So what we'll do here is we'll look at player 2. We'll set his score incremented by 1. So increase the score by 1 for player 2. And in the other direction, if the ball has gone off, basically if the ball's left edge has gone off the right side of the screen, that means player 1 has just gained a point. So we have player 1 score increment. And we'll also, now of course, this score value is just an attribute to the player itself. That has no bearing on that surface. So we need to re-render that font to that player 1 and player 2 score surfaces.
Exactly. So
right after we increment the score, let's go ahead and reflect that in the surface itself. So here we have incremented player 2's score. So we'll look at player 2's score texture, and we'll set it equal to a new surface that is HUD font, and HUD only has no R's in it. So HUD font.render. And once again, we're rendering some text. Now the text is going to get a little bit interesting here because I need to specify a string, some text to render to, but currently score is given as an integer. So I'm going to use some string formatting to take care of this. We'll into the string place %D, so do a C-style string format. Now the data we're getting for this format, we'll specify using the modulo operator, and we'll feed in player 2 dot the value score. So that should take care of the text. That will nicely format the score as a string and feed that onto render. The other arguments we need to worry about now are whether or not to anti-alias, which we'll set to 1, and then what color to use. So I'm going to give, again, a color of green, just like when we had first set up the surface. And that should take care of player 2's score getting redrawn. I'll copy that line now and also put it into place for player 1's score. The player 1 score value being based on the player 1 dot score variable. Now, if we run and there are no syntax errors, as a matter of fact, let me get the syntax errors out of the way. I'm going to run and we'll do a check module and everything seems to have checked out. These errors are from before. We've got several runs in place since then. So if we run, the expected result is that the ball would go off the screen, and either way the score would get incremented, and that would be reflected by the surface. The surface is then rendered to the screen down here in draw. So the expected result is that we see the scores update, but that's not yet going to be the case. If we watch the ball go off the screen, player 2 is still 0, and still 0. So watching for player 1's score, also still 0. And we're running into a very interesting case in the way Python handles scope. If we look up here, what's actually happening is, unlike all the other variables we have used from inside classes so far, here is the first case where we are assigning the value. In all of these other cases, what is actually happening is for things like, let me find a good example, where we had looked outside of the, I'm looking for a case where we have screen height. In this case, we have to look outside. Let's see. We're looking at the actor class here as an example. Down here in center XY, we at some point need the screen width value. What happens here is screen width doesn't exist inside of this method. It's not a local inside of this method. So instead, we reach further and find the screen width global just out in the main script's code. Now the difference here, what's happening here, is we are assigning. Just like if we had made any other variable. If we had made a variable called foo and assigned it some random value, that would be a local variable to the method move. That same thing is happening here. It's reading this as though we are creating a variable called player1score, which could easily exist in our own local scope here inside this method, different than the real player1score that we're looking for. So in order to have this variable point at the real variable within the code, we'll have to mark player1 and player2 score as global within this method. We'll have to make them global and address them as such. To do that, I'll jump into the very first line within our move method for the ball, and we'll global, and let me spell that correctly. We'll global player1 score and player2 score. Player2 score, and now that we've done that, we should be able to run and watch the scores increase. So watching for player 2, and look at that. Now we have 1 point, 2 points, and waiting for the ball to go the other way, we can watch player 1 score now, go up to 1 point.
Beautiful.
So now we have that running. That was just a matter of taking care of scope and how the player 1 score variable was addressed. So that really brings the Pong game to a close. I'm going to let it run just for a minute. I want to watch.
Get it to go up to 2-digit.
Yeah, I'm going to watch it, which may take a little while. It won't take that long. And I'm hoping for player 2's score, because I know the other one's going to work. We're not worrying about the right edge of player 1's score over here. That guy's fine.
Well, then I'll just send it back your way.
So I'll just play the game really horribly for a moment. And wait, yeah, we need my score to go up.
Oh, that's right. So I got to stay out of the way.
All right, one more point. But look at that. Perfect. Watch, as the 1 appeared, it appeared on the left side, not the right side. Right. So we're basically where we've just created right aligning for text. But again, with that, now the game is fully playable. We have scores for both players, and that is going to wrap up the Pong game inside of Python. Again, just what we wanted to put together as an interesting example to show something that can be done inside of Python.
The whole thing was thrown out there so quickly. I mean, just yesterday, I felt kind of energetic. You felt energetic downstairs. At least you seemed that way. So I thought I'd just throw it out as a quick question to any member sponsors that were interested. If we had 5 people chime in quickly, we'd do it. And I was quite surprised. We had 5 people chime in quickly. So here we are, put it together. Again, just prototype fashion. But if nothing else, those out there that are completely new to Python have got a taste of it, especially if they followed along. And like I said at the very beginning of this little mini-series, we're going to be kicking off an actual Python class for member sponsors starting later next week. So, Logan, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you very much, especially with it being 6 a.m. in the morning. You've done an excellent job.
Oh, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Glad to get a chance to test out some new things.
Yeah, without a doubt. And with that, that is going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot.